Hi, Sean here. Today I'm just going to show you some editing techniques on Photoshop. So we're going to be looking at levels and a few other different things in the adjustments section on Photoshop. So I'm just going to drag this image down and open up Photoshop. Okay. Right, so I've got this image here. So we can pretend that this is an image that you've taken with your camera, or we can pretend that this is an image that you've scanned in using the scanners in college. Okay, so what you'll see down here on your layers panels, first of all, is that you've got one background layer, as we always do. So the best thing to do here is going to be to duplicate that layer. So we can do that by pressing Control and J, and you'll see that we'll have a double, so we've duplicated that layer, so we basically copied that layer. Now it's good to do this so we've always got a reference point with our background. We've always got something to go back to if we make a mistake. Okay, so first of all, say that this is an image that I've just scanned in as an example. I go to Image and Adjustments, and if I go down to Levels, okay, here you'll see this little histogram come up. Okay, and on levels, this is where you can adjust the levels of this scan or of this photograph. Okay, so you've got these three little arrows here. So this arrow that's black represents the shadows. This arrow in the middle here, that represents your midtones and your middle. Okay, and this arrow at the end here, that represents your highlights. So let's just show exactly what they do. So if I start moving the shadows here, you can see that my image starts to get a lot darker. Okay, and then if I move the middle, a lot of my mid-tone will start to get darker depending on which way I move it. And your highlights here, so if I move that, you'll see how the image gets brighter. So a trick with levels is to blend these three, is to blend them together to create the effect that you want. So for this image, I might take the shadow down a tiny little bit, not by much. I want to take the mid-tone a little bit. Might take it down a tiny bit. Okay, and I'm just going to put the highlights up. So bring out those highlights there. Okay. So for this particular image here, because it's like a found piece of plastic, it's got all these really weathered effect on the actual plastic, and also the background is full of texture. So the subject here is full of texture, and also the background is full of texture. Okay, so another editing technique I can do is if I go to Adjustments, I can go to Brightness and Contrast. So you can add more contrast into the image. So let's just see what that does. Okay, so you see you've got lots and lots of contrast now. So you've got like a big difference between the light parts of the image and the shadow parts of the image. Okay, so if I just take that down a bit, I think I'm going to take a little bit of contrast out of this actually, because it's quite high in contrast anyway. And then you also have your brightness, which is your overall brightness of the image. So if you just watch what that does. Okay, so I'm just going to take that down a little bit. I quite like that effect. Press OK. Okay, another thing we can do is we go back to Image and Adjustments again. We can go down to Hue and Saturation. Okay, and saturation is basically how much color is in the image. So if we take that saturation down, you'll start to see the image filtering out the color. So it becomes more and more black and white. Okay, but if you start putting more saturation in, it becomes more full of color. So I quite like that effect. I think that looks quite nice. It kind of adds to that texture, like really gritty feel. So of this found object here and in this photograph, it adds to that texture. With your hue, that basically changes the colors of the photograph. Okay, so if I change the colors here, okay, you can see what effect it has. Okay, well let's just take it back to normal. And lightness is pretty similar to brightness as well. It just shows you how light the image is. Okay, another editing technique we can use is which would get color balance. Okay, so we can go to color balance, And this is really good if you want to kind of add like a general tone to your image. So if you want the image to kind of have a warm tone, or if you want the image to have like a real cool tone. The tone balance here is either shadows, midtones, or highlights. So I probably suggest that you start working on your midtones first, then maybe add some shadows and then highlights, and then kind of mix and match all over again. So say if we want this, I actually want this to have like a bit more of a warm tone. So let's try and add a little bit of red to the midtones. Okay, and maybe a little bit of yellow as well. Okay, so let's try that with a shadow as well. So let's try and add a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow. Okay, and with your highlights, I think I might want a bit more yellow in the highlights. So you can see what an effect that has. It's made the image really warm, like full of warm tone. So let's see what effect it'll have if we take that out. So if we go for blue instead, so let's bring blue into the highlights, and let's bring a lot of blue into the midtones, and let's get the shadow, and then bring a lot of blue into the shadows as well, and let's put some cyan in there as well. So you see how that can have an effect on the image as well, is that now has got a really cool tone. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that because I don't like the effect. I don't think I need to change the colours on this too much because I'm quite happy with what I've got here. Okay, so at this point what I can do is go back over to your layers panel, and I can see what my original was like by just simply clicking this eye. So this is what I came in with, so this was my original. Now if I click the eye again, you can see the difference, so that's my new one. Okay, so then you go to File and Save As, and you can save it as a Photoshop file. Okay, in this instance I'm not going to do that. Or remember how to flatten an image. If you go to Layer, and if you flatten the image, so over on your Layers panel here, that's just made it into one background image. You can now save it as a JPEG. So Save As, and then if you just make sure the format here is in JPEG, and then you can save it anywhere you like. Okay, I hope that helps. Thank you.